Good afternoon, and welcome to the afternoon session of the Landmarks Preservation Commission's public hearing and public meeting for September 30th, 2025. We're going to resume with public hearing item number 6. And with that, I'll turn it over to the Director of Preservation, Corey Harala.
Right. Thank you. Public hearing item number 6 is LPC 26-01649. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1384, lots 21, 22, 51, and 52, 831 to 837 Madison Avenue in the Upper East Side Historic District. Number 831 is a no-style building remodeled in 1956. Numbers 833 and 835 are two neo-Greek style row houses designed by Charles Black and Company and built in 1885 and 86. And number 837 is a Queen Anne style row house designed by Tom and Wilson and built in 1884. The application is to demolish 831 Madison Avenue and construct a new building on the site, construct rear yard and rooftop additions at 833, 835, and 837, and combine the buildings as well as replace storefronts.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Ward Dennis with Higgins Quays Barth and Partners. I will give an overview for the project and then turn it over to.
Could you hold on for just a second? We have one technical thing we need to take care of.
Okay.
Okay, we hadn't unlocked the webinar, so we're going to read in the item again, just to make sure everyone that's since joined on Zoom will hear that information. So public hearing item number 6, LPC 26-01649, application for a certificate of appropriateness, the Borough of Manhattan, block 1384, lots 21, 22, 51, and 52, 831 to 837 Madison Avenue in the Upper East Side Historic District. A no-style building remodeled in 1956, that's number 831. Two neo-Greek style row houses designed by Charles Black and Company and built in 1885 to 86, numbers 833 and 835. And finally, a Queen Anne style row house designed by Tom and Wilson and built in 1884, that's number 837. And the application is to demolish 831 Madison Avenue and construct a new building on the site, construct rear yard and rooftop additions at numbers 833, 35, and 37, and combine the buildings internally as well as replace storefronts. You may now continue.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Ward Dennis with Higgins Quays Barth and Partners. I'm joined today by my colleague Sarah Scher, David Chipperfield from David Chipperfield Architects, as well as Giuseppe Sirica, Giuseppe Zampieri, and Alexandra Cianopoulou, and Jim Davidson from SLCE Architects. I will give you an overview of the project. We are looking at 831 to 837 Madison Avenue, 831 on the right, 837 on the left, located on the east side of Madison Avenue between East 69th and East 70th Street. The overview of the project, we are proposing to demolish 831 Madison Avenue, which is a no-style, non-contributing building, and construct a new apartment building on that site. We are also proposing a rooftop addition above 833 Madison Avenue, which you will see from visibility studies. It's a 3-story addition, but minimally visible from the street. We are also proposing modifications at the storefront level of the 3 historic buildings, and we are proposing to reconstruct and enlarge the rear of the 3 historic buildings as well. Looking at the site, again, 831 on the right, this is a no-style building constructed in 1956, replacing an earlier building. The other 3 buildings all date to the mid-1880s in the neo-Greek and Queen Anne styles. Looking at 831 specifically, as I mentioned, it was originally built in the mid-1880s. The facade was removed, new facade constructed in 1956, pushing the building out to the street wall at that time. Just to note, the 831 site is 41 feet wide, so it's wider than a traditional row house. The evolution of this block very much, I think, epitomizes the evolution of Madison Avenue through the 19th and 20th century. In the mid-1880s, again, row houses were constructed with stoops coming down to the street. In the early 20th century, as Madison Avenue was widened and the stoop projections over the property line were outlawed, the stoops were removed, and many of these buildings were, at that point and into the 1920s, converted to commercial retail use at the parlor and basement levels, which we see in our buildings here. Also, in this period of time, in the teens through the 1930s, many row houses were taken down and new apartment buildings were constructed. Quite often, these apartment buildings are built in limestone and light-colored brick. And then we also see occasionally on Madison Avenue, there are about 10 sites where the row houses were taken down and new buildings put up in a later style, such as at 831. This is just a couple views along Madison Avenue showing that evolution from the row house scale to the mixed scale of apartment buildings and row houses with retail at the ground floor. The apartment buildings very often occupy full blocks or partial blocks. There are examples of mid-block apartment buildings such as shown in the center, and as well mid-block side street apartment buildings that are visible over Madison Avenue. So it is, as the designation report discusses, a very mixed scale on Madison Avenue. And we see that here in these two maps comparing 1891 with 1950. In 1891, we see all brick masonry row house scale buildings. By 1950, almost all of the blocks have at least one, sometimes more, 10-story or taller apartment buildings. And then, you know, as the apartment buildings were constructed on Madison Avenue, of course, it was done over a period of time, seeing on the left from 1901 in the more Beaux-Arts style, neoclassical, neo-Renaissance styles in the teens and 20s, and then evolving into Art Deco and Art Moderne styles by the 1930s. So there very much is this evolution of style along Madison Avenue, always reflecting the architecture of its moment in the construction of these newer apartment buildings. As I mentioned, there are about 10 or so sites along Madison Avenue that are no-style buildings. A number of these have been redeveloped over time with new buildings proposed by the commission. And those buildings, you know, are different in style and height and design, but include 760 Madison, recently completed, 947 Madison, which was part of the Whitney townhouse expansion, and the Polo Ralph Lauren building on Madison Avenue as well. And then we do have examples and precedents for visible rooftop additions, both historically on the left and approved by the commission on the right. Again, on the top right is the Whitney Townhouses project. You can see the rooftop addition visible over the 74th Street side of the project. I'll just note, and you'll see that the addition that we are proposing is much less visible than what we're seeing here. So I'll ask Giuseppe Zampieri to come up and introduce the design for Chipperfield.
Thank you very much. Giuseppe Zampieri from David Chipperfield Architects. So I just wanted to introduce quickly the intentions of the project before my colleague Giuseppe Sirica will introduce the project, and hopefully David at the end will conclude our presentation. So the project intentions are mainly four. The first one is, the first intention is to get the right urbanistic solution, of course, from 829 to 839 A41, adding a mid-block volume 831
Excuse me,
and
excuse
integrating the
me,
existing row houses.
excuse me. Can you speak into the mic? You're
Yes, of
speaking
course.
past it. Yeah, because
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah. Shall I start again? Okay. Adding a mid-block volume 831. Integrating the existing row houses 833, 835, and 837. The next one. So the second intention is proposing an elemental architecture solution in, of course, 831, detailing the mid-block front part at the street frontage, and then proposing the mid-block part like a mass. Then the third intention is searching for a sensitive restoration, keeping the historical tracery, and then searching for the integrity of the row houses 833, 835, and 837. And the fourth intention, getting the right base solution for the retail frontage, integrating new and old portions in the macro scale and in the big scale and in the small scale, relating new and old materials, again, for the existing building, between the existing building restoration and also between the existing and the new. So all from A31 to A37. I think the main intention of the proposal at the moment is trying to respond to the variation architectural situation of Madison Avenue with a great architectural diversity of materials, heights, and buildings. I pass over to Giuseppe Sirica for the next. Thank you.
Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Giuseppe Sirica from David Chipperfield Architects. I'll try to explain the main ideas behind the project, starting from the elevation analysis. The west elevation is showing an alternation of tall buildings and low buildings, and also on the east elevation is clear that, but also on the west elevation, it's clear that there is a mix of small individual buildings together with the large structure as the apartment building in front of the site, which is occupying one block. And from the south elevation is clear that there is a range of different materials, even if most of the buildings are made of limestone and bricks. There is this palette of whitish and reddish colors, generating a very heterogeneous streetscape. And these elevations are showing the physical, the impact of the new massing within the site. You can see the new volume at A31, which is aligned in terms of height to the apartment building at A39, and the small volume on top of A33, the rooftop addition, while the small squared volumes you can see on top of the row houses are the volumes of the vertical circulation of the staircase and of the elevator. And this is showing the silhouette of the proposed volumes in front of the, in relation to the opposite building in Madison Avenue. And it's clear that the proposed building is fitting within the alternation of tall and low buildings. And this slide is showing the depth of the proposed building at A31, and also the articulation, the geometry of the top floor, which is in a way reinterpreting some of the conditions that we find in many of other buildings in the street. And the relationship between the new volumes and the existing buildings is even more clear from these aerial views of the model, where we see that the proposed building is in relation to the larger buildings of Madison Avenue. And again, it's the idea for the volume is to generate a simple volume and try to articulate the top of the volume as it happens again in many of the buildings of the site. And this is the west elevation showing the facades on Madison Avenue. The proposed building at 831 is in a way is aligned with the building at 839 in terms of geometry, height, and colors, while the rooftop addition is more in consistency with the row house at 833. The idea for the facade is to have a simple alternation of solid and voids with rectangular openings set within limestone frames. And the idea for the addition is to have a brick masonry, reinterpreting some of the characteristics of the row houses. And these axes are showing the volumetric concept. We tried to soften the mass, the impact of the mass, through a series of ideas. The first idea was to try to capture the top of the volume with a series of setbacks on the Madison Avenue side and on the rear side. The second idea was to treat the mass as a composition of two volumes, a more articulated volume in the front, where the facade on Madison Avenue is turning around the corner and generating a different front, and a more simple mass on the back. And then using two materials, limestone for the front facade and the brick for the back. And we are trying to take one of the conditions that we find in many buildings in Madison Avenue, where the front facade is made of stone and is covering as a skin the brick volume behind. As in these buildings, it's also clear that the fenestration concept is different from the side and from the front, also because we are in a mid-block site. And this visualization is showing the relationship between the new building at 831 and the row houses. What I was saying about the two volumes is even more clear. The proposed building is legible as a composition of two overlapping components: the articulated front on Madison Avenue and the masonry made of bricks with a different fenestration on the back. And it's also clear the idea of making the top more articulated, also following LPC staff recommendations in this case. We tried to keep the primacy of the row houses on the street while asserting with the new building a more contemporary identity, a little bit in discontinuity with the rest. And this is showing the harmonization of the new building within this heterogeneous streetscape, where we have a different range of materials and colors. And it seems that the buildings is fitting in a comfortable way along the street, along Madison Avenue. And this is showing the material concept. As I said, the idea is to use limestone panels for the front facade, but using two different finishes. A more rough finish, so some blasted surface on the front of the panels, while on the side, we would like to have a smoother surface. And there is also an effort here to make the brick facade a little bit more expressive through the articulation of and the alternation of structured bricks course and soldier bricks course. Also, there is this idea of keeping the horizontality, which is quite evident on the front facade, also on the side through this soldier brick coursing. Here it's clear that we have projected horizontal bands on the main front, while we have recessed vertical panels on the back. And also the front on Madison Avenue is a little bit more sculptural and more three-dimensional, also because on the side we have to deal with a series of constraints also regarding the light and air rights. And this slide is showing the condition at apartments level, where we have Juliet balconies, which are also giving a more residential character to the house. We were thinking to use a bronze railing and a bronze framing for the windows. And this is showing the base of the building, which is in continuity with the base of the retail fronts. We will see this in another slide. There's this three-partition made of limestone panels, and we can see the entrance to the residential lobby and the two shop windows on the left-hand side. And this is showing the relationship between the row house at 833 and the proposed building at 331. The idea of having these projected bands and these recessed panels is a sort of reinterpretation of the ornamental qualities of the row houses, where these extrusion are a little bit reinterpreting the pilasters and the moldings of the row houses. It's more clear the relationship between the addition on top of 833 and the row house. There is this sort of strong relationship in terms of geometry and the dimensions of the openings, but also we try to emphasize the opening by adding terracotta elements as a sort of reinterpretation of the framing that we have on the row house fenestration. And also on the roof, we see this cornice as a reinterpretation of the cornice of the Neo-Greek building. In a previous option, we had opaque solid parapet, and one of the conversations that we had with the staff was to set back the parapet and make it lighter in order to reduce the impact, the visibility from Madison Avenue. And this is showing the connection between the masonry brick wall of the addition and brick masonry of the side facade of 831. We have the same material with different colors and also used in different ways. And the terracotta framing are adding in a consistent way in terms of materiality emphasis at the opening. The elevations are now summarizing what I just explained in the previous slides. Maybe what I need to add is that the side elevations are very much influenced by a series of constraints given by the core placement. For instance, on the south facade, we have the elevator and the core. So we have less windows, but also we have latent air restrictions, fire regulations, which are affecting the side facades. This is the north facade, which is a little bit more free because it's 80 feet apart from the corner building, and this elevation is showing the relationship with the addition and the setback of 40 feet of the addition. And this is showing the rear elevation. We will come back to the idea for the existing buildings, but from this elevation, it's clear the aim to preserve the individuality of the row houses, even on the new rear facades. And this showing a selection. I think we have also some samples of first selection of the materials. As I said, Indiana limestone in two finishes, brown bricks, which have a similar color to the limestone for the tower, while we have red bricks and terracotta panels for the rooftop addition on top of 833. And we are using galvanized steel in bronze finish for the metal elements. They are all materials rooted in the area and reused in a more contemporary and minimal way. And these views are showing the impact of the proposed buildings from southwest. This is a view from Madison Avenue. This is a view from East 69th Street, and a closer view from 69th Street from the southeast, showing also the articulation of the top volume. And these photos are showing the mock-up that was built a couple of weeks ago of the rooftop addition. Actually, what I have to say is that the mock-up is representing not only the volume of the brick masonry, but also the parapet, which is set back from the edge of the building. This is another view. This is a view from the East 70th Street. And now I leave a word introducing the part of the existing building.
Thank you, Giuseppe. So I'll just take us through the proposal for the existing buildings. Thank you. On the upper part of the row houses, items A through F on this drawing are all staff level restoration, but we are doing full restoration of the upper floors of the building. On the storefronts at the base of the building, we have a mix of historic and non-historic storefront materials and configurations, and we're taking a restoration and rehabilitation approach, restoring the historic material and then modifying or replacing non-historic material. Just to look at the historic conditions for these three buildings, 833 and 835 both had storefronts that were installed in the 1920s. 833 in particular has some very nice cast iron features within the storefront, which we will be retaining. 837 on the left remained residential until the 1950s. The stoop was removed and the bay window came down to the sidewalk. And then in the 1950s, the bottom part of that bay was removed and new storefront constructed. We don't think that that storefront is significant. The red here is showing the historic material and the black is showing the non-historic material. And this aligns with the Madison Avenue storefront master plan. All of the red, with the exception of some of the window infill on the top right of 833, will be retained and restored. Looking through building by building, at 837, we are proposing to remove the 1950s storefront, recreate the base coming, the bay window coming down to grade. That will remain a retail storefront, so it does have a show window, but we have a taller bulkhead, and then we are proposing to restore and recreate missing ornament at the parlor floor level. We are also, as part of this, realigning the parlor floor height. So we are raising that by about 12 inches or so to align floors with the building next door. And then this is just a rendering showing that the restored bay window and the restored decorative features at the parlor floor level. And then at 835, we are proposing to remove the storefront infill, which is all non-historic, and construct new storefront infill in a very similar partie with the center openings and the profiled spandrel and cornice, but it will have a slightly more contemporary feel to it. And then this is a rendering of that. The signage would all conform to staff rules. And then at 833, where we do have cast iron material, we are proposing to retain that cast iron material, and that is the pier at the far right, as well as the colonnettes that you see at the ground floor level and second floor level, and that cornice at the spandrel level. All of that will be retained and restored. The pier at the far left is actually wood, carved to look like the cast iron, so we will remove that and replace that with cast iron matching the pier on the right. And this is a rendering showing that configuration with the new cornice, spandrels, and the new marble stone base. And then this is just an overview showing all of the storefronts together. We are realigning, as I mentioned, some of the parlor level floors at 835 and 37 so that we can get a consistent floor level throughout that retail space. You can also see in this view rendering of the addition at 833, as Giuseppe mentioned. The mock-up was done showing both the railing and the masonry portion of the building. So working with staff, we did make that a railing at the top to reduce the visibility. And then looking at the rear of the building, the configuration of the donut on this block is not a traditional sort of open green space. Our rear yards are very shallow. Many of the buildings within the center of the block are built to the full depth of the block. So it's not a traditional donut. You can see here some of the views within our rear yards where we have, anywhere from about 10 to 15 feet of rear yard space on the Madison Avenue buildings. This is a block plan showing the existing on the left. And again, you can see how some of the mid-block buildings do cut off the donut. And then on the right, what we are proposing on 35 and 37 to construct commercial 4 stories to the rear lot line, and then on 33 and 31 to also construct almost to the lot line. This axon, I think, shows that that configuration best, the existing on the left, the proposed on the right. And then within the row houses, we are proposing to reconstruct the rear of the row houses. There are a number of reasons for this. The primary one being that we need to have fireproof construction on these buildings as part of the construction of 831, and to have legal light and air over those buildings. This also does afford us the opportunity to do some floor realignment and to combine retail spaces within. We are keeping at all of the party wall positions, we are keeping thin walls coming in. So as you're walking down the street, you will see a 10-foot or so of masonry wall coming in, marking the divisions between the row houses, and that does happen at all of the floors. We're only showing the ground floor in this case. This is a section through 837. We have similar sections in the appendix for the other buildings, showing the reconstruction of the row houses behind the primary facade. So we will be shoring up and keeping the front facades, and then removing the rear combustible structure and constructing new fireproof construction behind, as well as excavation below. That excavation also does allow us to locate a lot of mechanical systems at the lower levels of the building and reduce the amount of mechanical equipment on the top of the building. And then this is just a view of the existing condition on the rear of the row houses. And then the proposed conditions. So we are proposing a variety of different brick finishes, colors, so that the individual row houses will still read on that rear elevation. I think, is David Chipperfield admitted into? Okay. David, if you are on the line, hello.
I am here. Good
Okay.
afternoon,
Please
everybody.
tell me when you need me to advance.
I'm David Chipperfield. I think you can, Ward, I think you can just flick through as you wish. I'm not talking necessarily. Good afternoon, commissioners. I'm really sorry not to be there with you. I know how irritating it is to be in a room and have one person on a screen. And clearly, Ward and Giuseppe have explained the project, I think, very thoroughly. I suppose just an overview. Clearly, what you can tell from our iterations and the work that we've done, and we've obviously shared this with staff over the last many months, was to find a balance between new volume and the existing buildings to sort of protect the existing buildings as much as possible. And within the new volume of 831, to deal with this challenge, which is a very New York condition of the main body of the building, especially the party walls, being compromised by fire and lighting issues. And in a way, getting the facade to do the sort of hard work of giving identity to the building. And at the same time, we want to find an architectural language which is both articulate in terms of the way we build it in the contemporary way, but at the same time, trying to find a way of blending in using the Indiana limestone and using a building which is, you know, predominantly a masonry building. We think that's very important. The challenge, of course, is the north and south elevations, to try to make sure that the two parts of the building, the brick body and the limestone facade, have a sort of compatibility and a totality to it. I think everything else has been very well covered and well explained, and obviously we're here to answer any questions.
Thank you very much.
Done?
Commissioner.
Okay, thank you so much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Commissioner Goldblum?
Sure, thanks. Couple of things. Maybe I missed it, but in your analysis of the context, did you show that the development in the district of higher buildings, taller apartment buildings, were there any of those non-corner mid-block buildings, or were those either full blocks or corners? My recollection is that they were either full blocks or corners. Did I miss one?
There are most of the buildings, most of the apartment buildings are full block or corners. There are 3 taller buildings that are mid-block. We showed 2 of them, one at 74th.
Are they this tall?
No, I think one might be this tall. The others are in the, I think, 8 to 10 story range.
Great, thank you. Number one. Number two, in the Chipperfield vocabulary in New York City landmark buildings, there's 2 flavors. There's the trabeated flavor on 40th Street, which is very similar to this, and there's the punched flavor on Jane Street. Why did you choose the trabeated as opposed to the punched?
David, are you able to address
Shall I
that?
speak to that a bit?
Yeah, please.
I think the punched window solution was very much to do with a lower building. That building that you're referring to, the brick and the sandstone building, was very much fitting into a low streetscape condition, and 5 or 6 stories. And I think, therefore, it has a sort of relationship to the street. It doesn't have a challenge of being a tower and repeating itself over so many floors. I think in this case, we felt that the limestone, in a way referring to the limestone, the 40th Street building you're referring to in Bryant Park is a terrazzo precast component. Here, I think we've adopted a softer limestone approach and tried to find a balance between this sort of quiet wall on the one hand, and on the other hand, giving it some depth and articulation through the repetitive and sort of tectonic idea. I mean, I think probably, you know, the challenge here is quite different because we have inevitably a sort of brick volume, which is the body of the tower. It's a sort of unique condition, these towers, because they are three-dimensional in one way, but on the other hand, they are very frontal. And we wanted to play up that frontality. And therefore, I think this play between the Indiana limestone facade in a much more dressed and formal way to the front played off the brick body of the building. And I think that was probably as an attempt to answer your question.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions? Commissioner Chu and then Commissioner Ginsburg.
Yeah, I have two questions. The first is, how much of the existing townhouses is remaining? Because you mentioned keeping the facades. The rears were all being replaced with new plans and additions to extend further into the lot, correct?
Yes, and to have the fireproof construction. So it will be new construction behind the facades of the row houses.
They're also extended.
Yes, and extended,
So what is remaining in the existing historic houses?
the facades.
Just the front facades?
Yeah.
And the floors are all being changed and rebuilt, so it's really just the front
Yes.
facades. Okay. The other question is, clearly, this is a large new mass in the place of what was a townhouse. Can you speak a little bit about how the design approach addresses the scale change from the adjacent houses?
David, do you want to address that, or?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? I didn't hear the last bit.
Yeah. So the question really is that the house that's left on the lot is the corner, and Michael questioned the precedent of larger structures on mid-block and not on the corners, and clearly from a massing perspective, the small house left on the corner of 69th is the one that feels out of scale. So from a design perspective, I'm sure you guys, the horizontality that you created start to create some relationships. Can you speak a little bit of how the addition proposal wants to integrate as one views the building from looking north at the corner of 69th and Madison?
No, I think it's a very fair question in a way. Clearly, if you replace a townhouse scale building, or it was slightly over that in terms of the 831 building, you are imposing a different scale within the street. And I think in some urban conditions, you might question that. I have the feeling in this context, although you're totally right that the little one on the corner is slightly adrift, and it's not part of a larger composition. I think it's, it is just part of this collage between taller buildings and lower buildings, which is happening on both sides of the street, and obviously lower down and further up. I mean, your observation is completely correct, but that's clearly the consequence of a taller building in this location.
Well, I think, yeah, I think you understood the question. There was a comment in the presentation that I thought was pertinent, which was there's the larger urban massing approach, and then there's the more specific micro massing approach of the block. The Madison Avenue strategy is that there are lots of tall buildings that are mixed in with the low rises. And I guess my question was more related to the micro scale of this block and what it does to that townhouse on the corner. I think, David, your answer is that your approach is on the larger scales. It's Madison and it's mixed between low rise and high rise. Is that correct?
Yes, and I think within the context of Madison Avenue, especially this, and I don't think it's a humiliation of the building on the corner. I mean, clearly it's, I think you're right to point out that it becomes more isolated than it is at the moment in terms of its presence. But I'm not sure it's completely humiliated by that process. I think also by being on the corner itself, it has quite a strong three-dimensional presence. You know, so while I completely accept the observation, I'm not sure it's sort of out of character with what's going on generally. You know.
Thank you.
So I have two questions. The first is, are the rear facades of the townhouse combustible? You're saying you have to replace, I understand the structure is probably wood joists, and you need to replace that. But is the rear structure combustible?
No, obviously, the rear facades are brick masonry. We are enlarging to the rear.
Right, okay. And the other question is, were there studies done of any sort of setback at about the townhouse level at the, what is it, 4-story height to in some way break up the wall along Madison to have a little more of the scale of the townhouse?
On the front facade of
Right.
the building. I mean,
I think the answer is yes. We certainly did early in the process, and I think there was a discussion with staff about whether the tower should compromise itself by the sort of urban wall and step back at that point, or whether it should, as it were, present itself as a tower. And we certainly we presented options. Giuseppe, maybe you can refer to that, but we certainly presented options at that point, and there was a feeling that the building should be proud enough to be a tower, as opposed to having to sit back into the urban wall concept.
Thank
And
you.
I would just add to that, if you look at all of the other apartment buildings on Madison Avenue, they are all at the property line coming straight up. We thought about should the base of the building align with the row houses, but that's not how apartment buildings act on Madison Avenue.
And one final question, does this design use all the permitted floor area?
No, I don't. Jim, do you want to?
James Davidson, SLC Architects. We're about 20,000 square feet less than we're allowed. And that's only with the 10 FAR configuration, not 12. So we're well below what we could have built, and we were respecting the overall height of our neighbors to the north and the west very opposite.
So we are below allowed height as well.
Thank you. Commissioners,
Quickie,
go ahead.
on a zoning question, I'm assuming that for the corner building, you have light and air easement? Or you're kind of combining that into your site?
We're not using, we don't have legal light and air over the corner building.
Correct. That's
So those are lot line windows or fire rated windows?
that's correct.
Super, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions?
That's the limitation that Giuseppe was discussing.
Okay. Thank you. So let's move to public testimony. Is there anybody in the room who would like to speak on this item? Okay, yes, go ahead. Right, this podium here, and you have 3 minutes to speak. And please state your name.
I think that was a very impressive presentation, but I think it should be rejected, and I will tell you why.
I'm sorry, can you state your name?
Will. My name is Richard Roth, and I live at East 70th Street, with my wife, Roberta, and I've lived there for decades. I want to make clear my concerns and my objections to this proposal as it is currently structured. In particular, the so-called high-rise at 831 Madison Avenue. In addition to that monolithic building, the rebuilding of all the smaller structures into a single, much larger structure for the remaining space will occupy the entire plot and completely eliminates the north-south donut section of the property with disastrous impact on the spaces and apartments to the east. I believe that this is an inappropriate use of the space. I testified at the Landmarks Subcommittee hearing at Community Board 8, state my objections, and felt that they were recognized and supported by a vote to substantially reject the application. My letter of objection was read to the Community Board 8 full committee, and to our great surprise, the subcommittee position, after a rather cursory presentation, was rejected in favor of a 22-18 vote to accept the proposal, which is now before you. I urge you to consider carefully the impact of this proposal and how it will affect this part of the Upper East Side Historic District, and to direct that an alternative proposal, more in keeping with the character of the neighborhood, be put forward. Let me tell you my key areas of concern very briefly. Number one, aggregate mass. When viewed in their entirety, the aggregate structures overpower the footprint and occupy every inch of available space on the plot right to the eastern or rear property line. And if you turn that model around, you will see just how it affects it. It's very, very visible, and I think makes the point. It completely obliterates the north to south donut section running behind Madison Avenue. While this might be permissible, it is an inappropriate overuse of the available property, adversely affecting the surrounding living spaces. Full disclosure, I live there. Okay. It should be noted that a similar attempt to encroach upon the entire space at 21 East 69th Street on April 18th of 2012 was knocked down by the LPC in 2012, resulting in a modification, a scaled-down solution that gained final approval, and frankly, it's pretty good looking because I can see it from my window. As far as the new construction is concerned, I'd like to make clear that objections to this proposal have nothing to do with what is referred to as modern design for the large structure. Those arguing in favor implying that a contemporary design is a basis for disagreement, especially considering the unfortunate nature of the building to be replaced. Many contemporary designs have added considerably to the character of the Upper East Side and Madison Avenue, in particular, the new Armani building coming to mind. Leaving aside the design of the facade, which seems to be out of sync with the general feel of the neighborhood, a major aesthetic failing of the design is its failure to offer a four-sided visual solution. Using as a rationale photographs of other buildings in the district that use two materialities, the single-faced Potemkin-style frontage leaves a distinctly backroom presence looming over the neighborhood. That secondary materials were used on three sides of other buildings for reasons of cost at a point in time when there was no oversight or controls is hardly a justification. A quick look around many Manhattan neighborhoods discloses handsome four-sided architecture that takes into account that buildings will be viewed from every direction. The intrusion of yet another high-rise building in the middle of virtually an entire block of low-scale structures is entirely inappropriate and threatens to upset the balance between those high rises that already exist and the lower scale structures that are so pivotal to the openness and relaxed nature of the street to pedestrians. That quality is central to the character and appeal of life on the Upper East Side, and to permit its slow devolution to another shadowed canyon would be a significant loss. The moderately disingenuous photographs of mid-block high-rise buildings leaves the impression that other structures are already similarly situated. This is not the case, although this seems to be at issue. A visual examination, which I made by driving up the avenue, as well as the applicant's own map, discloses that any mid-block buildings are in fact contiguous.
Sir, if you could summarize your
Pardon me?
We're over 3 minutes if you could summarize your.
All right, well, let me just finish that statement. There are no freestanding mid-block buildings on the entire length of Madison Avenue within the Upper East Side Historic District. Okay, I urge you, I can't finish, but I urge you to reject this proposal and give serious consideration to a modification that is more in keeping with the nature of the neighborhood. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Is there anybody else here who would like to speak on this item? Noting that there isn't, I will turn it over to Michelle to see if we have any remote testimony.
Anyone in Zoom who would like to testify, please use the raise hand function and I will call on you. Once you've been elevated to panelist, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Please unmute yourself and state your name for the record. First, we have Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Zeynep Turan, and I'm speaking on behalf of Friends of the Upper East Side. Friends is pleased to express its support for the proposed contemporary design for 831 Madison Avenue. We find the proposed volume and height to be appropriate and in line with the number of contemporary designs we have seen emerging along this section of Madison Avenue. We commend the thoughtful use of brick and limestone, each treated with distinct surface articulations that contribute to the architectural character of the streetscape. While Friends is generally an advocate for the preservation of no-style buildings on the Upper East Side, our committee considered this particular proposal to represent an overall improvement to the site. In light of the inadvertent demolition of structure at 21 East 65th Street in 2022, which was in fact a key impetus behind LPC's Vulnerable Buildings Initiative, Friends strongly urges the Commission and the applicant to submit a technical policy and procedure notice 10/88 and to adhere strictly to the guidelines it outlines. This is especially critical with regard to excavation work and the removal of existing floors in this historic buildings at 833, 837 Madison Avenue. The committee is concerned that the rear yard donut will be further eroded by lot line expansions, despite the fact that this open space has already been heavily compromised. Such incremental incursions not only undermine the historic spatial character of the block interiors, but also have a cumulative effect and detrimental impact on access to light, air, and the overall livability of neighboring residents. We are broadly supportive of the proposed storefront rehabilitation. However, we believe that 835 Madison Avenue could benefit from additional detailing and a more empathetic separation, similar to that found at 833, where cast iron elements and cornice trim enhance the facade. We also recommend that the bulkhead line be extended and that additional integration incorporated into the storefront at 831 Madison to ensure visual continuity across the entire stretch of storefronts from 831 to 837. This articulation should also serve to further differentiate the retail base from the residential portion above, in keeping with the spatial Madison Avenue Preservation District design guidelines. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Next, signed up to testify, I have John Graham. I'm promoting you to panelist.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society in New York. The Victorian Society recommends denial of this proposal for many reasons. We begin with the applicant's premise that it is appropriate to construct a 200-foot tall building mid-block on Madison Avenue. In support of this, they provided a Bromley map locating all the buildings 10 stories or more on Madison between 61st and 77th Street. But the map they're showing is from 1950. 31 years before this district was designated. They've also provided photos of 3 modern buildings constructed on the avenue since designation. 2 of them are only 4 stories tall. We do not believe that the third, a 14-story corner building at 760 Madison, sets a strong precedent for the construction of a 200 200-foot tall building in the middle of the block. The massing models also show taller buildings along Fifth and Park Avenues. We do not believe these set a precedent for new buildings on Madison. Both Fifth and Park are very wide avenues where 15-story pre-war apartment buildings are the predominant building types. Row houses there have essentially disappeared. 5-story row houses are still a significant part of the streetscape on Madison. New 200-foot tall towers are not. The minimalist detailing proposed at 831 is inappropriate. The historic row houses which flank 831 all have the visual richness which is a dominant characteristic of the historic buildings which line Madison Avenue. 831 doesn't reflect this in any way. It is two materials on the significant primary facade, stone and glass, assembled in large, simple planes. It could be in any urban area, but should not be at this mid-block location on Madison. We think the existing 1956 building at number 831, despite its obsolete label of no style, is actually more appropriate to the historic building in terms of scale, details, and materials than the proposed replacement. Finally, we object to the creation of two-story interior spaces at the storefronts at the historic buildings, 833, 835, and 837 Madison, which would be joined to the new tower. Two-story storefronts are not typical here. The change will be visible from the street, and it will diminish the domestic character of these row houses. We also object to the proposed removal of historic protected components of the existing storefronts. Thank you very much, Commissioners.
Thank you for your testimony. Next is Basil Walter. I'm promoting you to panelist.
Hello. Hi, this is Basil Walter. Can anyone hear? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I am the architect and designer of Maxime's Club, which is directly across the street, takes up the two lower floors of 840 Madison Avenue. And I'm here today really representing my client, Robin Burley, in his support for this project. Mr. Burley, unfortunately, is abroad, and he's sorry that he couldn't join this meeting, but he asked me to convey his support for the project, which has been presented to us. The Burley organization has invested quite a bit of time and money in the last couple of years in opening Maxime's and investing in this neighborhood. And there's a recognition really that Madison Avenue is a premier destination, and we believe that this will help to promote the engine of revitalization of this area. So to the extent that Maxime's could be a catalyst for some larger economic growth, we believe that this is another potential very positive addition to the neighborhood. So in terms of the design, I will also say that I was speaking earlier today with my friend Andrew Alpern, whose book on Emery Roth is coming out next week, and he was pointing out that the building on the corner, the tall building on the corner of 70th, built in 1927, is a very obvious precedent, although I take everyone's point that it's older and was pre-Landmarks Commission. But as one looks at that elevation, there's a pretty clear contextual argument to be made in terms of the mass of the building. So beyond that, I think we really just, and not on my own behalf, but on behalf of Robin Burley and the Burley organization, want to express our support for this project.
Thank you. Next is Kaylee Johnson. I promoted you to panelist.
Hello, Commissioners. Kaylee Johnson speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HTC finds this proposal to be inappropriate and should be denied. The new building and the rear yard expansions are completely out of scale with the surrounding buildings on the block. This proposal represents the opposite of why the characteristic and historic streetscapes of Madison Avenue were designated in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom who would like to testify, please use the raise hand function now. Do not see anyone else in Zoom, so I will note that Manhattan Community Board 8 recommends approval. The New York Landmarks Conservancy expresses concerns over the proposal and its appropriateness. And we also received had two individuals who recommend denial of the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to address some of the comments?
Sure. I mean, I think first off, we were very happy with the support from the community board and from Friends, both of whom I think recognized the validity of new design on Madison Avenue, and that's really what this project is about. With regard to, I'll try to cover everything, but with regard to the question of mid-block buildings, as I mentioned, and as we showed in some of the photos, there are at least three mid-block buildings, 923, 780, and 680 Madison. Some of those, yes, are next to taller buildings, but they're also next to shorter buildings. 923 Madison Avenue is mid-block with row houses to the north and a church to the south. So that, and again, Madison Avenue is not just about the corner buildings. There is very much an up and down rhythm. I don't frankly understand the Victorian Society's position about a 1950s map. It is showing buildings today that are 10 stories tall and taller. With regard to the donut, as we showed in photos, the rear yards on these buildings are 10 to 15 feet of paved area, and then a wall, and then there are rear yards beyond. So we're not encroaching on that interior donut. We're not blocking interior residential areas. There was an interesting question about the four-sided architecture, and that's a design decision. We did decide that there is this context along Madison Avenue of buildings with design facades presenting, fronting onto the avenues and onto the side streets, and then secondary elevations in usually not a common brick, but in in a more decorative brick. And we followed that paradigm, which we think is very much contextual and appropriate for Madison Avenue. Friends had some interesting comments on the bases of the storefronts. I mean, certainly we took a contemporary approach where we are inserting new storefront material. We took a contemporary approach, and that is the case at 835. Certainly that is something that could be worked on and modified with staff, but I do think that keeping the different approaches on those row houses at the base of the building really maintains the individuality of the buildings as you're going up and down the street. We're not trying to unify, even though we are trying to unify on the interior, we're not trying to unify on the exterior. And then on the reconstruction of the row houses, as I mentioned, the primary driver for rebuilding the interior of the row houses is fireproof construction. We are using that and probably would, even if we were keeping interior structure, would still look to combine some of these storefronts on the interior. These individual row house retail spaces, particularly in this area of Madison Avenue, A lot of them have been vacant for a long time. They've been difficult to rent, and having the flexibility to combine spaces within is important. We could do that with existing structure and all, but we can't, we do need the fireproof construction. And then finally, I'll just say, going back to particularly what Friends and what the community board said, that really, this is a no-style building. It does not contribute to the historic district. It is appropriate to evolve historic districts, and it is appropriate to bring contemporary design into historic districts. And it is appropriate to bring height and more housing and development into historic districts. That is how historic districts grow. It happens with your stewardship and curation, but it is how historic districts grow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, do we have any final questions? Okay, if not, let's go ahead and close the meeting. Commissioner Ikumbe, can you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Commissioner Chu, can you second that?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed. Corey, would you like to say a couple words?
Yes, just to restate a few of the things the commissioners are to focus on today, and also affirm some of the statements by the applicant and provide a couple other notes. Regarding the existing building, as was just noted by the applicant, the description and the designation report is no style for this building. It's not an obsolete term for us. It does mean it doesn't contribute to the historic district, and in fact, the staff could approve a proposal to demolish the existing building. However, the commission, of course, has to approve its replacement. So that is still in use and still very much the case. So of course, that new building itself on 831, although it is combined with the other lots, is you can kind of think of that as its own new building for the subject of discussion. In addition to that, we can move to the additions themselves. There is a, thinking of each building on its own, what's proposed is essentially a 3-story rooftop addition on 833. And then behind each of the buildings, full extensions into the rear yard beyond that. Just kind of going back to all of these, the new building plus the additions, I mean, certainly the commission has approved new buildings in historic districts that are at least somewhat taller, if not more so, than the building they replace, if the commission finds that the context and perhaps the evolutionary history of the historic district supports that. The commission has also approved proposals to combine buildings and have multiple lots be part of an overall project. And in many cases with that comes replacement of interior structure to some degree or another, often much if not all of the floor plates, perhaps to a lesser extent, but still with some combination, the internal party walls between buildings. And then in some cases also applicants do propose to remove portions, if not all, of rear facades. However, I think it is also fair to say that the commission has also had an interest in all of those elements, kind of thinking of the smaller buildings individually and as a group, and has often asked that at least portions of interior party walls be retained, often with rear facades, that certain elements such as special features, top floors, that they either be retained or in some cases replicated either in the same plane or perhaps further out. So there's been a variety of responses to proposals such as this. I'll also note that the proposal includes excavation throughout the lot, and that along with all of the interior structural replacements and work certainly does put this into the category of a project that we will be doing enhanced engineering review for. And in fact, we've already started that process with our consulting structural engineer. The applicants have begun putting those materials together, and we've had some preliminary reviews, but that will continue regardless of where this proposal ends up. And then last, regarding the storefronts, as was correctly pointed out during the presentation, much of the storefront infill is not historic, and in our Madison Avenue guidelines is coded green. However, there are portions that remain at 833, cast iron sort of entrance and some small columns, and also a little bit of the infill itself, I believe at the second floor to the right side that are coded red in the design guidelines. And that essentially means the staff wouldn't be allowed to remove any of that, but you all can consider the proposal before you. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum, would you like to start this discussion?
You bet. Okay, thanks. Very interesting, very complicated, lots of moving parts. Okay, first, I agree that the no style category, while an official bit of business that we live with because of earlier generations, in my view, it does not apply to this lovely modern style building. But I don't think that, you know, because we are bound by the way the district was created when it was created, the removal of this building is permitted, as Corey noted, without comment from me. So there you go. But I do think that luckily we don't do that kind of thing going forward in such a rigid and formulaic way anymore. I think that and this certainly is a modern building, but for whatever that's worth. Regarding the townhouses, I think that the way that they should be looked at, in my opinion, is the way we would look at any townhouse modification anywhere in the city. And as I've certainly noted in many other cases, the removal of the entire rear wall is something that I understand the commission to not favor, not only because of its effect on the donut, but because of its effacing of the volumetric expression of the historic building. In this case, those historic buildings are being virtually completely effaced. So I would suggest that the applicants would leave the top floor of the rear facade, as we almost always request, so the volumes of the buildings are discernible. And additionally, that they leave more of the party walls on the interior, as I believe we requested at the multi-townhouse renovation with new building project on 14th Street and Broadway. Is that Broadway? No, it's 9th Avenue. I think that that's a template that we should adhere to when you have buildings like this. I mean, it's important, I think, for me to remember that we don't just regulate facades. We regulate buildings, and we allow more latitude on the interior of the facades, but that doesn't mean we let them totally disappear into a vacuum without comment. So I would ask that additional historic material be retained while upgrading the buildings to meet the required fire code and building code regulations. In terms of the addition on 833, I think that the volume of it is okay if they could modify the visibility of it looks like the visibility is relatively limited. I would like to have seen a little more visibility studies of that. But I think that you might be able to get rid of it by doing a mansard on that building. There's mansards on the next two buildings. It's not an unusual approach. It's something that has been added to historic buildings over time, and it might reduce the visibility. So if that cannot be done, if the staff doesn't or others don't think it's a good idea, then the floor should come off so that it is less visible. I think that the storefronts, it's great that they're holding on to the historic material, and I don't think that I would suggest that they modify that intention. They, to me, looked a little bit repetitive for what are very non-repetitive buildings, and I would suggest that they try to develop a little more distinctive storefronts for the two 833 and 835. 837 looks great, but I think that there needs to be a little more differentiation between 833 and 835, considering how very different the buildings themselves look. So then we get to the big building. Couple of things. First of all, I think that the question of the mass, the question of the volume, Ward did note that there were a few buildings in the district that were mid-block buildings that were higher than their surroundings. I looked at two of them. One of them which was cited, I forget the, 780 Madison, is in between two much larger buildings, or not much larger, but larger than the norm, not townhouse buildings. And then he cited another one, was 923 Madison, that I'm looking at now. Very interesting building, and I think it's a relevant precedent because it has a church on the corner. And but the interesting thing about that building is that it does something that I think Stephen talked about, which is because the building next door is a church, and was presumably, I guess when when it was designed, it was presumed to stay to be there. And also maybe because the building itself, it belongs to the church, it seems to have a church logo on it. The building turns the corner. It's a front facade facing over the top of the corner building. And that's interestingly the same approach that we approved at 86th and Park. When Buyer Blinder Bell proposed a new building there, the north-facing facade over the church is a front facade that happens to be a party wall, or in that case, it was a north-facing building wall because they had to deal with the church. But it's the same condition as here. So I think that the issue that Stephen raised about the design of that front wall should be thought about carefully. But let me step back for a second to the volume. I think that the fact that the mid-block buildings are relatively few and far between, and that you have an issue of, that's not the norm, let's say, even if you can find a few examples to hang your hat on, suggests to me that the volume here should be looked at carefully. I don't think that it's right. I think it's too massive, too bulky for this particular location. I think that the idea of setting back could be looked at. I think the idea of removing height could be looked at. I don't have a particular formula that I would say endorsed, but I think that the volume, it just doesn't seem right to me. It seems, yes, across the street you have a massive building and up and down, and that's the way that the district works. But for me, this particular volume on this particular block looks off. And I think a lot of it has to do with the comment that Steve made about that corner building. It's just too drastic. I mean, if it were next door to the taller building, like the building on Park Avenue was, no brainer. Here in the middle of, and we know that these buildings aren't going away because it's a landmark district, and we're not going to let them tear down these lovely Victorian buildings. I don't think that it doesn't feel right to the district to me at the scale that it's at now. So I would ask them to look at that again. And the relationship to the corner building, to go back to that, not only I think should they be looking at that south-facing facade as being as having more of an interactive relationship with the corner building, whether you do that in the language of sidewall or not, I think is up to them. But I think that another project that comes to mind is there's a building that we approved on Fifth Avenue in the Madison Square North District that was allied with a corner Victorian lovely building, multi-story high-rise building. I'm forgetting the address, but it too was a case where the design of the high-rise integrated with and kind of swept up lines from. Do you remember that building, Corey? It was also a kind of an interesting store and loft building, Victorian. There was a dynamic between the corner orphan and the high rise next door. And I think this needs more of that. Volume, language. I think one thing that you can say with that I can say with confidence about the Madison Avenue district is that it's predominated by punched wall buildings. The apartment buildings are mostly smooth faced with punched holes for windows. There's not a building that we've seen shown to us that diverges from that model that wasn't built in the last 25 years. So I think the choice of the trabeated language is much more suited to Tribeca, Soho, places where that kind of frame language is kind of part of the tapestry of the district. I think here, a recognition of the nature of the texture of the volumes of the buildings is lacking in this, and I think it gives what is a beautiful design by an immensely skilled architect a generic quality here. It doesn't feel like it sits in its place enough. And while I accept his comments about the low-rise relationship of his other building to its location, I'm sure that an architect of that skill can find a way to speak to the specifics of the district a little more successfully. That's it.
Thank you. Mark, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to just make a comment, John, about something you said, Commissioner, and for all of you to consider. And this question about volumetric integrity and how it might apply to additions. And that the commission, back in the 90s and early 80s, early aughts was approving large rooftop additions, many multi-stories, simply because they couldn't be seen. And the commission moved away from that over the years, just sort of in the same way that it says that, it doesn't matter if it's not seen, it's sort of changing the whole essence of what this building is. So I think as you think about a three-story addition on this building, it's something to consider, and that visibility is not the only consideration that one might think apply when determining if it's appropriate or not.
And I would just respond to that by saying amen, first of all. And second of all, I think that to me, and again, happy to hear what everyone else has their own opinion. I think that in this case, that volume can be acceptable if other elements of the volume of that original building are retained and articulated. So I would be okay with the three-story addition from the vantage point of retaining the volume of the building, as long as the volume of the original building is indeed retained in the way we normally would with the top floor left, with the rear facade of the rooftop addition set back 3 or 5 feet, whatever our normal thing is, and to kind of do it in the way we normally do it. I personally could live with a three-story non-visible or minimally visible addition, but let's see what others say.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
So this is a classical 1950s architectural problem, integrating a modern building into an existing context that's totally different. I think they did, I must commend the architects. I think their diagrams are impeccable, beautifully done. I think their analysis of the heights were really well done. And I think the idea of using color, materiality, to kind of integrate it together, but they only looked at it in terms of the tower. Now, the tower, they have the limestone and then they have the brick. It doesn't really integrate with the lower buildings. And the question is, how do you integrate this? How do you do it? And I was looking at this last night and I was saying, okay, they connected the bases, they connected the 2 stories, and they finally made an alignment that was powerful, I thought. It held it. And I thought there was a shadow there that said, this is a sculptural building, modern, and it's holding together sculpture and new. It doesn't quite work yet. And I'm not sure it has to do with punch windows. I'm not sure. I know it doesn't have to do with the building itself. I think the tower is very beautiful, elegantly done. I've seen several of these and they're nicely done. I think it has to do with perhaps the materiality of the limestone in relationship to the existing buildings. What could be done? I don't know. I think it's just not, there's 3 buildings, there's a quarter building, and there's this tower. And the tower reads completely on its own. It's not integrated. And is there a way that color could integrate it? Is there a way the facade, one piece of the facade could integrate somehow without seeing weakly architectural? I don't know, but I think it's not there yet for me.
Commissioner Jefferson, did you have any thoughts on the three-story addition?
Oh, in the
And
back,
then
I
the-
think they have to lower the story in the back, and 833, it's too high. They have to
Okay,
lower that.
and then the
And
rear
the
facade?
back of the buildings, I'm looking at the back of the buildings here, and I have no way of knowing what was there previously. I have no way of knowing if it was a beautiful bay windows. I have no way of knowing, so I couldn't make a judgment on that. But I think what they've done is fine. You know,
We'll put the picture up on the screen again.
that's what they have.
There's another one, Abby, that has them in elevation.
This one has a, go back. That, dude, so that.
Yeah, there you go. You can
there
see
you
it
go.
there.
There you go.
Bay window.
The bay window. And I think those, but I'm not sure, can you see it? Because there's no,
They're not visible from a public thoroughfare, but again, I think if you could keep going, Abby, there's photos that show you the features, if that's what you're.
is there a donut?
No, it's a mess.
The donut here is more or less cut by large extensions on buildings in from the corner of the avenue. So it's its own donut essentially.
I didn't feel it had that much architectural integrity that, no, it's, I have to hear what the other architects say about this, because I thought the bay window stuff was really quite lovely. It should be kept. But if you can't see it, you can experience it from the inside, I suppose. But going back to this exterior facade, this limestone facade, I thought there were possibilities of working that and integrating it, but I'm not sure how you do that.
Okay, thank you so much. Commissioner Chu?
So repeated, very interesting project. And I think that the thing that troubles me is we're looking at a block right now that is all housing, it's all residential, but you've got a historic approach to scale and a contemporary, much larger scale, and they're just next to each other. I think the fact that the lot isn't on the corner is really unfortunate, because I think the design is very elegant. I like the design. I like the verticality, but I'd feel like it would be great in Soho. It feels more contextual to something that has context of that scale adjacent and all around, whereas this case seems to be more of a spotty or finger sticking up, and therefore it stands apart. And that's what I think is unfortunate here, because I do like the design and I think the architect is very talented. And I think the approach from aesthetics is simple, clean, modern. I do not have a problem with that. And I don't have a problem with its sense of identity in terms of their aesthetic choices here. It's really a question of how do you put mass on this block that I keep thinking about. And Michael's comment about the corner, totally valid. I totally see what he was saying. I was thinking similar. It's such a big facade that it is a front facade. You cannot say it's a side facade anymore because it's the biggest view of the building. And that is what makes the house feel out of place, is because I'm looking at a side facade behind a front facade. So there is some challenge there, and is there a way of stepping back? I'm sure this architect has tested 100 massing options here. I wish I could see some of them, because I'm sure many of them were very good. And when I look at this, there is a character to the historic houses that I read, and part of it is the storefront treatment, which is new, and I'm okay with it. It's been changed. It's not historic, but there is a layering to this block that is about the street face scale, the slightly set back 3 stories behind that, and then, you know, what's being proposed is another setback for an addition. I'm not sure what the solution to this is, but I do feel that from a scale perspective, if there was some kind of massing hint of a setback at the datum of around 4 or 5 floors, the whole block would feel different to me. I wouldn't feel like I was in a canyon on the left side where the 3 houses are now trapped. I don't really have a problem with the addition there. I just think that it feels out of place in relation to what's around it. I also wondered whether or not this two-sided approach is interesting. I think the architect maybe likes it because it has a slimming effect to the building. Otherwise, the south-facing facade feels overly massive and blank, frankly, and not articulated in a way that is a front-facing view. But I'm wondering whether or not this two-facade design approach could be thought from a massing perspective. That is there any option where the front portion of the facade could be more in keeping with the historic mass, and then the rear portion spans over the existing houses in some way, so that there's a setback mass and a frontal mass? It's a very different design approach, but I guess I'm just feeling that this specific approach is very bold, but I feel like it's a little too extreme of a change. And there's too little historic fabric that's really left, the proposal. Materiality, I think, again, very skilled architect at making modern contemporary work generally fit in historic conditions all over the world. There's been successful cases where the firm has done excellent integrated work. I think they can make another pass. I think this could be an amazing project, but it does need a little bit more sensitivity to historic massing.
Okay. Stephen, did you comment on the rear facade?
I did say that if there were a solution that feels a little more integrated with the main mass, I would consider some alteration to the rear facade. But as is now, what's being proposed is asking for things that we have approved, but not all those issues all in one proposal. And that's where I feel like there's a lot that's happening here, and not enough historic fabric and condition being left on the site.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Kimbe?
First of all, I'd like to say I appreciate the amount of rigor that was put into this project. I can tell that a lot of intentional moves were made, and there were a lot of options on the board in order to make them. I also appreciate the model, which actually does help visually very much to give us a better understanding of what's happening on this block. I do agree with many of the comments that were said by the commissioners here. First of all, I believe the tower building itself is very beautifully articulated. I do, because of other things that are present, there are some issues that arise. I'm not completely sold on the height of it. And that's something that may have to get played with the massing itself. Also with the lone building on the corner. So the tower, it does act as another facade, and it should be looked at in how to integrate that into the streetscape itself. As for the 3-story addition, I can't really say, because I think even though it's on its own separate building, the play with the building next to it actually does kind of influence what's actually happening at that position. What I do enjoy is the ground floor level. I love how it reads horizontally, and I think it actually helps to give a grounding of the entire site. And maybe that can be emphasized a little more. I don't know exactly how to do that. I do agree with the comment I heard before about the the storefronts at 833 and 835. There could be a little more play within them, so they could be a little more distinctive. But I do enjoy the presentation at 837. As for the rear facades, I believe there should be some keeping of the existing fabric of the area, even though the rear yard's a hodgepodge of a bunch of mess, pretty much. But I believe in a few more iterations, it could become more holistic, and actually the entire site could read more uniform.
Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg?
Thank you. So we've had a lot of discussion and it doesn't all agree, which makes it hard for the applicant to figure out what to do. And I'm not sure I'm going to help it much. I grew up on the Upper East Side and I just have memories of walking up Madison Avenue and how much variation there is. So I think variation is a good thing on Madison Avenue. It isn't like Park Avenue with the uniform cornice heights, et cetera. And I think the argument for the new building that almost all the residential buildings go straight up is valid. I think looking at that south facade has been as pointed out as it's really a front facade, not a side facade, is valid. I think the point about 35 and 33 being a little too alike at the ground floors is also valid. More variation might help there and be more fitting with the neighborhood. I think I can accept the 3-story addition. It may need to be reduced by 1 story. I think some of that rear facade, messy as it is, should be kept because I think the messiness is part of the neighborhood. And at least as Commissioner Goldblum was saying, the top floor, but maybe more than that. This is a hard nut to crack. I think the massing of the new building may be fine. Maybe you take a floor off as you study it. I would have loved to have seen some of the studies because I might have been then convinced that there shouldn't be any change at the townhouse cornice level. But right now, I think that's a bit of an open issue. So in general, I think this is a well thought out project and it just needs a little more work. And I wish we were a little clearer of what direction to go, but hopefully the applicant can figure out something that makes us, or at least most of us, happy.
Thank you. And Commissioner Mayen?
Try to bring it home. I think not giving clear direction is good. It lets the applicant use their own creativity and make their own decisions. That being said, you know, I want to begin by saying I appreciate the architectural rigor, the beauty of the presentation itself. It was thorough. It was particularly with the inclusion of the model, although the folks on that side of the table, I think had, you know, different interpretations than the folks on this side of the table. So I walked over and stood behind you, Stephen, while you eyed the model during your comments. You know, I support, you know, as was noted by the applicant, you know, development and modernization and regeneration of this part of the city, certainly through both adaptive reuse, which in a way is being proposed, perhaps a bit of a stretch here, and new development. That being said, you know, kind of overall, in terms of the presentation, I found that there was really a focus on beauty, which is incredibly important and something that we should consider. But there was not a corresponding focus on appropriateness, which is what we need to help get you over the finish line. And I think it can be made, and I think some tweaks can be made. So I'll go scale, materials, and then talk about the historic building. So I'm okay with demolishing the no style building and replacing with a much larger building. I'm comfortable with height in this neighborhood in general. I think the argument that there's mixed scale, varied here, is accurate, and helps to make this height appropriate. I think, as noted by everyone else, obviously the tension is between a mid block and a corner height. And there might be a more sort of neighborhood scale way to think of that, about that. The discussion here has really focused on the scale of this block, right? But there's kind of a tension between an overall development scheme on the Upper East Side where you have tall corners reinforcing intersections that are, right, have axes and are 2 dimensions, versus Madison Avenue. And some of your renderings began to make this argument for you, but your design doesn't really lean into it yet, which is that Madison Avenue maybe is about an axial view north or south and the street wall varying, as opposed to oblique views of corners in the round. Maybe that could be an argument that you might take, and that might lead you to a different approach to the southern facade, as was suggested. It might lead you to a different approach to the cornice line and the setback at the townhouses, which was suggested. But I think picking kind of a design argument for both appropriateness that applies to the way the design is resolved would help with the scale issue. I personally do buy into the conceit of the sidewall being treated differently than the materials at the front. I actually thought that was quite clever, but that does, again, going back to the scale issue, suggest a particular approach that needs to be taken to make that argument. What else? In terms of materiality, I'm confident the materials will be beautiful. This wasn't really commented on so much. I'm completely, comfortable and supportive of, modernist, minimalist style. I do question if some additional articulation or detail might be required to make this building sit comfortably within its context. As much of a fan as I am of this firm's work. And I mean, I would add, there are a few other firms as skilled at, defining and articulating the relationship between historic materials and new materials. And the kind of tension between the two I find to be, absent here. There's kind of a new building. It's going to be a beautiful building. And then there are old buildings. And what is the relationship between them, I think, could be a rich vein to mine. Moving to the historic buildings, I found the treatment of the facades to be lovely. I had a minor question about 837, the bottom portion of which is currently missing. I may have misunderstood the rendering, but it appeared that it's basically extruded down to the ground, but in a quite plain and simple manner. I think it's probably brownstone, and if that's the case, I wonder if the simplicity of that material can hold up to the plainness of its treatment, or if it needs additional detail, right? If we have a simple material or a simple treatment, generally, we might want a rich material in and of itself. And then, to the backs and the tops of the historic buildings, here again, I found it a little bit hard to follow and to be sort of lacking in an argument about appropriateness, rather just, this is what it needs to be and it will be beautiful. So I think we need a little bit more to hang our hat on, and I think we need a little bit more careful description of what is there versus what is proposed. It was hard to follow how the massing exactly is changing. But I do think the essence, as it was characterized, of the buildings is lost too much with the sort of wholesale demolition. And we have approved, as was noted elsewhere, some elements of change to these types of buildings, rooftop additions, extensions, and so forth, but less so sort of all of these elements together. So I think some reconsideration of what might be saved is warranted. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm also going to speak on this since we only have a certain number of commissioners, just so that I can give my feedback as well. I think I'm going to be a little bit in the minority view and agree with Community Board. On 831, in terms of the height and the massing of the new building, I can find it appropriate. I think that you've spent time setting back the upper floors. You have the different, materials and the different fenestrations to kind of make it not seem as bulky. I think that the design is contemporary and it's clearly a new design, and I think that's fine. That's something that we approve all the time. And then in addition, I think that the material that you're using, the limestone and the brick, are materials that we find in Madison Avenue typically. So because Madison Avenue does have low-rise buildings interspersed with high-rise buildings, I can find the height and the massing appropriate. I also want to acknowledge that you guys did have additional FAR of 20,000 square feet that you didn't utilize. And I think that was you were trying to be respectful in terms of the volume and the height to the context of this block and the block across the street. In terms of the retail facade, I think that's fine. I did like what one of the commissioners had said, that if there's like a slight articulation, that would make it even better. The 3-story addition, I'm a little torn on that. I do think that you might be able to explore something like what Commissioner Goldblum had said about a mansard. I think, you could look at taking it down 1 floor or doing something maybe a little bit sloped. And then finally, in terms of the rear facade, I do agree with the other commissioners that to only keep the front facade is very difficult in this historic building. I think that we have to somehow come up with a plan to retain some of the historic fabric in the rear facade. And I don't know how you want to do that, whether you retain the top floor or you do something else, but I do think that we have to retain some more of the historic fabric on the rear facade. Okay, so those are my comments. I don't think that we have the votes to get you through today, but I do think that we came up with a lot of comments that will guide you in the next time we see you. And I think that would really include maybe some looking at, I think I was kind of the minority, I think maybe looking at the style of the building. A lot of the commissioners did comment on the massing. I think there was also some comments on the facade wall. I'm treating it more like a corner. I think Commissioner Goldblum had talked about the party wall, maybe making it a little bit more visible. In the front, maybe making 833, 835 storefronts more distinctive, doing something, with the 3-story addition somehow. And then a lot of the commissioners also seem to want to keep more historic fabric in the rear facade. Is there anything else, Corey, that I might have missed?
I think you covered a lot, and the applicant, of course, can continue to work with staff on interpreting the different feedback that was given today and refining the design in order to come back at a future public meeting date.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we're going to continue with the agenda, but I do want to note a change to the agenda in case anyone is on Zoom or in the building to see public hearing and item number 8. We are actually not going to present that today. It's going to be read into the record right now and will be presented at a future hearing, public hearing, at which time testimony can be taken and the full presentation will be given. So again, we're reading into the record, public hearing item number 8. LPC 25-12461, that's 132 West 130th Street and the Central Harlem West 130 to 132nd Street Historic District, being read into the record today. So I'll now move back to public hearing item number 7. This is LPC 26-00124. It's an application for a transfer of development rights. It is noted in the agenda as modification of use in bulk, but it's an application for a transfer of development rights. This is in the borough of Manhattan. Block 1375, Lot 1 East 60th Street, the Metropolitan Club Building in the Upper East Side Historic District. So this is an individual landmark. It's a neo-Italian Renaissance style club building designed by McKim, Mead & White and built in 1892 to 94 with alterations in 1912 by Ogden Codman Jr. The application is to request that the Landmarks Preservation Commission issue a favorable report to the City Planning Commission regarding the continuing maintenance program for the landmark in connection with a transfer of development rights pursuant to Section 7442 of the zoning resolution.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Melanie Myers, attorney with Fried, Frank, Harris, Schreiber, and Jacobson. I'm here on behalf of the applicant for this, which, as indicated, is a request for a favorable report from the Landmarks Preservation Commission regarding a continuing maintenance plan for a landmark, which is the Metropolitan Club located at 1 East 60th Street, which is also in the Upper East Side Historic District. I'm just going to give a little bit of an introduction and then I will turn it over. The application is pursuant to the recently adopted Section 7542 of the zoning resolution. This section allows individual landmarks throughout the city to sell unused development rights associated with the landmark sites to other parcels on adjacent blocks. This is an as-of-right action. It requires a city planning chair certification and is as of right so long as a plan for the continuing maintenance of the landmark building is implemented and a report on the plan is issued by this commission. In this particular case, the Metropolitan Club will be transferring approximately 135,150 square feet of its unused development rights to a site that is zoned for high-density development located at the northeast corner of Madison Avenue and 60th Street. So while this zoning section is new, it's similar to the successful program that's been adopted for landmarks within East Midtown for about 10 years, and one that has resulted in preservation plans for many important landmark buildings in the area. And the plan that we'll be presenting today builds on those precedents established by those projects and will ensure the ongoing integrity of the Metropolitan Club as the landmark. All continuing maintenance plans include a requirement to undertake any capital work needed to bring the landmark to a high standard, and then a plan for the ongoing maintenance of the building following that initial work. So what we'd like to do is now I turn it over to Mick Doyle of Atchison Doyle Partners Architects to give a bit of a background on the building, to describe the investigation that its firm has completed in terms of the existing condition of the work and the findings of that report. And after that, we will describe the elements of the continuing maintenance agreement as they were informed by Atchison Doyle's investigation. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to Mick.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Atchison Doyle got involved with the Metropolitan Club over 25 years ago. So we've been looking at the exterior, the interiors, and feel very, we've been in front of the commissioners many times on different aspects of it. Most of it restorative. The largest intervention was the rooftop where we set up that exterior greenhouse area and a dining room in the old kitchen where there used to be an awning in the 1890s and the early part of that century. why don't we go back to the plan? Just, this is sort of at the bottom end of the Upper East Side Historic District. The building originally was made an individual landmark, then became part of the historic district, was National Register designated, and became part of the National Park Service special neighborhood. So it's got all those pieces to it. I just want to say a lot of the research the restorative work that we're going to be showing is really well documented. The New York Historical Society, or New York Historical as it's called now, has an incredible archive, photographs, drawings, and we've been able to mine that over the years to really do things authentically. And that's why a lot of this work has been at the staff level over the years. It hasn't come to the full commission because the documentation has been there. Next. The history, the building was basically in 1892 to 1894. It was Stanford White. It was McKim, Mead and White, but it was really Stanford White personally who was involved with this, and with J.P. Morgan and the Board of Governors at the time. And architects will love it because the building was basically done by change order. There was never any full budget presented in the beginning. It was heaven, I guess, for them. Doesn't work that way anymore. The McKim, Mead and White had obviously done a lot of the clubs in town, like the Harvard Club and the University Club, but that was more McKim, and you can tell it's a lot more straight length, straight lace. This is a lot more exuberant and is definitely Stanford White. Next. We had this timeline. I won't go into the weeds about it, but it really documents sort of the interventions that of the history of the building and what we've been doing up until the current time. Those dates I hit were with the designations are important because it's really a gem of the landmarks in the Grand Army Plaza when you consider the Plaza Hotel, the Metropolitan Club, the Sherry Netherland. It's quite, the plaza itself and the park. It's an incredible corner. Next. The setup on this transfer development rights is that required work to bring the building to the sound condition that we've been sort of monitoring and planning for quite a while. We're going to present really quickly here. The capital work items that we are just finishing the courtyard restoration, which was done more for the waterproofing initially. They had a pressed concrete simulated cobblestone that was done, as far as we can figure. There was no documentation for this sometime in the 50s, and it was leaking, and it's mechanical rooms and occupied spaces below. So we were able to document with a lot of the original drawings, and this is just finishing literally the last couple of weeks, the recobbling of the area and the stonework. We'll see it in a minute. Let me look here. The main club library wing and the rear facade of this section, you'll see in a moment. And this library wing, and the annex, which was a 1912 addition. It was a purchase and integrated into the club. The facade cleaning and restoration, which was essentially completed in 2023, has ongoing work and continued work that's required for portions of it in the courtyard area. Okay, this is the courtyard. I just wanted to show you the pressed concrete, which was really starting to peel up, and you can see there's also some great mosaics that are going to be restored, hopefully in the next wave of work. But all the granite and the stone has been replaced and is currently being cleaned, and the dried mortar being taken off. Next. These are clean shots, and working with staff very closely, we were able to, there were a series of single steps, which were a nightmare for ADA accessibility, which were able to be smoothed out. So they were major tripping hazards and lawsuits after many years. And now you can get all the way to the one step at the entrance to the building. This is the mosaic floor, which is, again, we have the plans, and the two mosaic entries are close to 200 grand of restoration work. And we've done similar work in the Plaza Hotel, so we know exactly what we have to do. We just have to get it started. Next. This is just a temporary photo of the work that's been completed, not totally washed down yet. Again, this is showing that. Next. The rear facade of the library wing, which is the center wing in the back of the courtyard, it's sort of an area that faces the Pierre Hotel. It's essentially brick, beige brick, facing the hotel. It needs major restoration work. We're just at the point that we've drawn it up. We've gotten some preliminary estimates, and that's going to be done as soon as hopefully this is approved, and this will really help to maintain or start that sound condition situation.
Mick, in the interest of time, since we're behind, I think the commissioners, it's fair to say the building is in very, very good shape. The staff has reviewed the existing conditions report, and they're very, very good stewards. And so, Mick, if you want to just quickly go over whatever restoration work that's new that you might be doing on the front of the building, and not sort of in the back, and then
just go to the facade. It's on the rooftops, the facade, just backing up, the facade was just cleaned. We're continuing that around the entire building. That was cleaned and restored, and just that's all solid masonry. It's not steel, so it's been beneficial in that we can do like major repointing without significant taking it apart. Next. This is the interior of the courtyard, and these are viewed from the street, and that's going to be continued in the cleaning and pointing. Next. And then I'll bring Melanie back just to hit the continued maintenance plan, which we've documented in an exhaustive appendix, which we've shown to staff. And I won't have to go through that with you,
right,
of the interior systems, the mechanical systems that affect the well-being of the building, and the exterior.
Thanks, Mick.
And I will be brief as well. So the continuing maintenance plan will actually be encompassed and documented in a recorded agreement that will be between the Landmarks Preservation Commission and the owners and the foundation of the owners of the building. And it really will have 4-point requirements. One, it will require that the owner do the exterior work that Mick just described in order to bring it up to sound condition. Then there will be an enforceable obligation to maintain the landmark structure in that, to kind of ensure that that landmark quality is being maintained. There will be an obligation to do a survey of the building every 7 years for the benefit of landmarks, and among other things, carry out the work that's identified in any of those reports to maintain the building to the sound condition standard. And finally, to secure those obligations, there will be maintenance funds. One will be to assure the completion of the upfront work, including the courtyard that's going on today. And then secondly, there will be a fund which will be equal to 10% of the proceeds that will be assuring the ongoing protection of the landmark to ensure that the inspections are done and necessary maintenance work is able to be completed. So with that, that's the end of the presentation, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions? Okay. Is there any?
I just want to say one thing before we move to public testimony. And commissioners, just to reinforce what the applicant was saying, this is the first application we're seeing under this new 7542. And what's significant about it is very different from the special permits that we have reviewed in the past. This is, as the applicant pointed out, considered almost as of right, depending on the approval by this commission of this maintenance plan. And so we are not reviewing there's no harmonious relationship finding. There's no requirement to look anywhere else but the conditions of this building. And so just wanted to.
In the case of 74711, there is a kind of qualitative language having to do with the level of preservation. Is that same level?
That does not exist in here. And so, this building, as been pointed out, is in excellent condition, and the proposal is to keep it in that condition. And so any issue about the level of restoration that may be required is not at issue in this case. That may be something that we will discuss in future applications, which there will be some coming down the pike, but not this one.
So there is no language about
Correct.
that in the text.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody here in the room that would like to speak on this item? Noting that there isn't, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle for remote testimony.
Thank you. Anyone in Zoom who would like to speak on this item, please use the raise hand function and I will call on you. Okay, first, we have Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts, and you have 3 minutes to speak. Please unmute yourself and state your name for the record.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Zeynep Turan, speaking on behalf of Friends of the Upper East Side. Friends supports all efforts to maintain and improve this distinguished landmark building through the proposed continuing maintenance plan and capital improvements project. However, the committee expresses serious concerns regarding the proposed transfer of air rights. Under previous zoning regulations, Friends would have had no objection to a transfer limited to adjacent lots, and we would likely have issued favorable testimony. However, the City of Yes zoning changes have dramatically altered that context. The receiving site for this transfer is located on Madison Avenue, and critically, the public review process, specifically ULURP, the Uniform Land Use Review Procedure, has been eliminated. Friends is alarmed by the lack of transparency surrounding this process, particularly given the scale of what is being proposed. This transfer would enable the construction of yet another super tall at 655 Madison Avenue, directly adjacent to 520 Park Avenue, which was completed in 2018, much to the Friends' dismay at the time. We are especially concerned about the overwhelming height of the proposed development and the impact it will have on neighboring buildings, including the partial obstruction of windows in the existing super tall at 520 Park. The apparent absence of a meaningful public forum deprives preservation organizations like Friends and the wider community of the opportunity to comment on changes that drastically reshape historic districts like ours. We're deeply concerned about the precedents this sets, especially in the case of landmark air rights transfers now moving forward without adequate public oversight. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to testify on this? If so, please use the raise hand function. Not see any additional hands raised, so I'll note that Manhattan Community Board 8 recommends denial.
Okay, would you like to respond to that comment?
I would, and as Mark mentioned, the purpose of this review is for the continuing maintenance report for the landmark. The one thing I did want to just mention, because it might have been a little confusing, is that the receiving site is actually in a high density, primarily special midtown zone, and it is not in the historic district. So I just wanted to be clear about that point.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any final questions? Commissioner Chu?
Has nothing to do with our site in question, correct? And it has nothing to do with what's being proposed for our review. A transfer of air rights is not for us to speak to. Yeah. ULURP, right? Okay. Yeah. Okay.
With City of Yes, that we were to, that this was that requirement that in some cases, and only in some cases, were we taking a qualitative look, and that was when there was a visual relationship between the landmark and the landing site. In that case, and only if there were bulk modifications being proposed, would we opine.
Okay.
So those have been eliminated now as I think primarily because the amount of the distance that you can move the air rights now has been
Right.
increased to the benefit, I just want to add, to the benefit of the individual landmarks. It's something that the Landmarks Commission has been on record supporting for many, many years, since many individual landmarks, especially in outer boroughs and other places, don't have sites that were close enough to use the existing.
Even transfer to.
Yeah, transfers to, so.
Great, thank you. So let's go ahead and close the hearing. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Commissioner Ikumbe, would you second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed. Commissioner Mayen, would you like to start this discussion?
Sure. This is new, but sounds like we're just reviewing this beautiful maintenance plan for this beautiful building, and looks great. Thank you very much for taking such good care of it. Don't really have anything to comment on.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg?
Agreed, appropriate, and building's in good shape, and this will continue to allow it to stay in good shape.
Does anybody have any other thoughts? Oh, okay. Commissioner Goldblum?
Just wanted to say that I think it's great that there's another tool that applicants can use to monetize the benefits of landmark properties. We need more carrots. We have plenty of sticks. We need more carrots.
Thank you.
Appropriate.
Thanks. Okay, so Commissioner Rand, would you like to make the motion?
Sure. Regarding LPC 26-00124, 1 East 60th Street, Metropolitan Club Building, Upper East Side Historic District. A neo-Italian Renaissance style club building designed by McKibney and White architects and built in 1892 to 94 with alterations in 1912. By Ogden Codman Jr. Application is to request that the Landmarks Preservation Commission issue a favorable report to the City Planning Commission regarding the continuing maintenance program for the landmark in connection with a transfer of development rights pursuant to Section 7542 of the zoning resolution. I recommend approval, finding that ongoing commission-approved restorative work has reinforced the special architectural and historic character of the building and site, that the restorative work has addressed significant long-standing water infiltration issues and other preservation issues, and has added in the long-term preservation of the building, that the implementation of a cyclical maintenance plan will ensure the continued maintenance and preservation of the building and site, that a positive report will facilitate the future transfer of air rights from this individual landmark pursuant to various provisions of the zoning resolution, which require such a maintenance plan as a condition of a transfer, that the owners of the designated building have committed themselves to establishing a perpetual cyclical maintenance plan that will be legally enforceable by the Landmarks Preservation Commission under the provisions of a restrictive declaration, which will bind all heirs, successors, and assigns, and which will be recorded at the New York County Registrar's Office, and that the restrictive declaration will require that 10% of the gross proceeds of each transfer of development rights be deposited into a fund dedicated to support the cyclical maintenance plan.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that? Thank you. Mark, will you call the vote?
Vice Chair Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Quimby,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Mann.
Aye.
With 7 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
Great. That's approved. Thank you. So that concludes our public hearing for today. We're actually going to go back and do another public meeting item, and our General Counsel, Mark Silverman, is going to talk to us or make a presentation for us.
Thank you, Commissioners. Mark Silverman, General Counsel. Commissioners, I would like to give you a brief overview of the hardship process in light of the recently filed West Park Presbyterian Church hardship application. This will be a general discussion of the nonprofit hardship standard that will be used in this application and the process as set out in the landmarks law. I will not and ask that you do not discuss the West Park application. Also, please note that to make the law and process as clear as possible, I have tried to minimize my use of legalese and have simplified some of the things and used different terms. Ultimately, review of any particular application will involve the application of specific words in the statute and be a highly fact-sensitive inquiry. Let me make sure. Cannot be overstated how important the hardship provision is to the landmarks law. The law has always included a hardship provision. It's codified in section 25-309 of the Administrative Code. It's the longest section by far in the landmarks law. It is an absolutely critical safety valve for the law because it seeks to prevent the law from being applied unconstitutionally. The hardship process is a type of application, just like a C of A. And the law provides standards and a process, and that's what I will be discussing. What is meant by a hardship? Well, hardship describes a situation where a property owner wants to perform work, either alterations or demolition, that the commission finds or the applicant concedes is inappropriate. The owner claims the inability to do this work imposes an undue burden on their property. The hardship process in section 25-309 is the way the commission determines whether the inability to do the work actually imposes an undue burden. The concept of hardship arose historically as government regulation increased during the late 19th and 20th centuries. It is related to the constitutional prohibition against a state using private property for public purposes without just compensation, known as the takings clause. As government regulation increased, courts were repeatedly asked to decide when a government regulation went too far and was akin to a physical taking in its restrictions on use, and therefore required either compensation or freedom from regulation. The hardship provision in section 25-309 is the way the drafters of the law sought to avoid constitutional challenges to the law. Hardship applications are rare, but have occurred periodically over the 60-year history of the commission. I believe their relative rarity is due to how hard the commission works with property owners to accommodate reasonable needs. There's been 23 applications, hardship applications in the past 60 years. The first one in 1967, the Jerome Mansion, was granted. The last 3 applications, hardship determinations, were city and suburban houses in 2014, a for-profit hardship where the hardship was denied. St. Vincent's Hospital in 2009 was a nonprofit hardship where the hardship was granted, and St. Paul and St. Andrews in 1989, which was a nonprofit hardship but was denied for not being ripe for a technical review. Of the 17 applications of these 23 that went through a full process, 13 were determined to be hardships and 4 were determined not to be hardships. The law provides 2 types of hardship processes, one for property that is exempt from real estate taxes. That's what we're calling the nonprofit hardship process. And then there's another one for all other property which is not exempt from real estate taxes. The presentation today is just focused on the nonprofit hardship process. Turning now to that test. Section 309 requires an applicant to satisfy 4 factors. The owner has agreed to sell or lease the property contingent on a certificate of appropriateness or a notice to proceed. The existing property is incapable of earning a reasonable return. The building is no longer adequate, suitable, or appropriate for carrying out the current or the historic charitable purposes. The purchaser seeks to immediately demolish the building and to build a new building on the site with reasonable promptness if a hardship is granted. I will discuss each of these factors individually. First factor, the owner has agreed to a contract to sell or lease the property. In this case, the lease must be for at least 20 years, and the sale or lease is contingent on the commission issuance of a C of A or a notice to proceed. In other words, the agreement is contingent upon a positive outcome in the process. Either the commission says the work is okay, and issues a C of A, or it determines a hardship exists and issues a notice to proceed. I will discuss the notice to proceed later. It's the final document authorizing work, inappropriate work to go forward once the hardship has been determined. The second factor asks whether the property as it exists at the time of the application is capable of earning a reasonable return during the specific test year. Reasonable return is a statutory formula defined in the law. It's not what a property owner or a real estate developer would utilize in managing property or when considering purchasing property. At its most basic level, net annual return is a cash flow analysis. It is defined as the net annual return of 6% of the valuation of an improvement. These are defined terms in the law. An improvement parcel is basically the tax lot, which includes both the land and the improvement, which is usually a building. Valuation is typically the assessed value of the tax lot as established by the Department of Finance. The net annual return means the amount the earned income yielded by the improvement parcel exceeds the operating cost. So for example, if the assessed value was $1 million, the property has to generate a net annual return of at least $60,000 during a specific test year to generate a reasonable return. So how does one derive this net annual return? One looks at the operating costs and the income. As I said before, it's mostly a cash flow analysis. Operating costs include your typical inputs: payroll, utilities, taxes, professional services. There's a 2% depreciation allowance for the value of the building. It's also important to note that what's not included in this, and that includes things you might expect, such as mortgage payments, amortization reserves. They're not included as operating costs. Moving to the income side of the equation, income means proceeds from the use of the property. Proceeds typically include rent or other income from use. An example would be if it's a residential building, are they renting, is there laundry facilities or storage facilities that people are also paying for? It can also include the potential sale of development rights, assuming there are real potential receiving sites to receive these development rights. That includes as of right zoning lot mergers, as well as special development right transfer provisions under the zoning resolution, such as the one we were just looking at today. Typically, you would look at the commission has looked at whether there are reasonable receiving sites and then try to assign a value to transfers of rights to those sites. The reasonable return analysis is for the building as it exists at the time of the application. What does that mean? The commission generally looks at the building's condition and situation. We can evaluate reasonable alternatives and investment where necessary to address government violations and to increase income, such as to rehabilitate apartments. The best way to think of this is we can consider alternatives that theoretically could be approved as appropriate. So reasonable expansions, rooftop additions, rear yard additions, that sort of thing can be considered. Although the law doesn't address how to deal with the costs of these renovations, the commission historically has allowed reasonable renovation and repair costs to be added to the 2% depreciation allowance. Finally, you can also consider the possibility of reasonable new development on the lot. The lot's big enough, another house or whatever that might fit on a lot. The third factor concerns the use of the property. Is the building no longer adequate, suitable, or appropriate for carrying out the current or historic charitable uses? Because nonprofit owners build structures or use structures to facilitate nonprofit use, they aren't driven by the potential profitability of the structure. The law recognizes this and ask the commission make a determination that the building is no longer suitable for carrying out those charitable purposes. The commission looks at the charitable purposes currently occurring at the building and the charitable uses at the time the owner acquired the building, if the nonprofit owner is continuing to use those, pursue those purposes. The law provides no additional definitions or explanations for what that term, no longer adequate, suitable, or appropriate, means. The commission historically has looked at both the physical condition and the limitations of the building at issue and the financial impacts of addressing those conditions. It's important to note this factor is not at all formulaic, like the reasonable return analysis arguably is. It's very fact sensitive. At this juncture, I want to mention something that you may hear about called the judicial nonprofit hardship test. As you will recall, the first factor of the hardship test was that the owner was entering into an agreement to sell or lease. That the judicial test was created by the courts to address the situation where that wasn't happening, where a nonprofit was doing the work, the redevelopment, or the extension itself, and not selling or leasing the property. The judicial test is relevant to our discussion because the commission has interpreted this judicial test to be essentially this third factor I was talking about, plus the fourth factor, which I'll talk about in a minute. Therefore, hardship situations that have involved the judicial test provide insight regarding what the meaning of no longer adequate, suitable, or appropriate means. The judicial test asks, does maintenance of the landmark either physically or financially prevent or seriously interfere with carrying out the charitable purposes? This test was first enunciated in 1968, so again, early in the commission's history, in the Snug Harbor case. That case, just to give you a sense of how it arose, involved Sailor Snug Harbor in Staten Island, a group of Greek Revival individual landmarks built in the early to the middle 19th century. The buildings were used to provide housing and other services to retired seamen, and in the 1960s, the nonprofit that owned them and operated them felt they were no longer adequate and wanted to replace the historic buildings with contemporary up-to-date dorms and other facilities. They applied to the commission to demolish the buildings. The commission denied their request, and the organization sued. And one of the claims they made was that the absence of a hardship provision covering their situation made the law unconstitutional. And the courts said, no, we can fill in that gap, and created this judicial test for situations like this. And what the court sent the case back to the lower court to resolve what it called subsidiary questions, and it listed 3 of them. Does preservation of the building seriously interfere with use of the property? Are the buildings capable of conversion to useful purpose without excessive cost? Does the cost of maintaining the building without use entail serious expenditure? The court stressed that this was a fact-sensitive inquiry in light of the purposes and resources of the nonprofit. Note, the answers to none of these questions is determinable of the outcome. Rather, there's an in-depth, holistic analysis of the facts and circumstances. There was no final resolution of that case. As many people know, those buildings are still there. The city purchased them a few years after the lawsuit was commenced. The following are some examples of the situations where the commission has applied this judicial test to help you think about how the no longer adequate, suitable, what that means. The Marymount School case. In that case, the school wanted to add a gymnasium to the building because physical education was deemed essential to the purpose of this all-girls school curriculum. The commission denied the C of A for the addition, but found that a hardship existed. St. Bartholomew's, apologize. The church claimed the existing community house could no longer accommodate its growing charitable uses, and the building couldn't be expanded, so they said, and they needed to demolish the building and build a high-rise with residential facilities and church facilities in the bottom to pay for that expansion. The commission denied the hardship, finding the historic building could be appropriately expanded and reconfigured, and that the church hadn't demonstrated it couldn't raise sufficient funds to pay for the work. And finally, in St. Vincent's hospital. St. Vincent's claimed that the existing level 1 trauma hospital was no longer adequate, and up to, to facilitate those kinds of things that needed to be the city's only level 1 trauma hospital. They asked to demolish a contributing building nearby, where they were going to build a new hospital. The commission found that the existing facilities were inadequate and found a hardship. Ultimately, St. Vincent's went bankrupt, and the O'Toole building, which was the site, is still there today. The fourth factor and final factor, it's pretty straightforward. It requires that the prospective purchaser or tenant seeks and intends in good faith to move immediately to demolish the building for the purpose of constructing a new building on the site with reasonable promptness. There are no specific timeframes for this, but a good faith intention and ability to move forward immediately have to be demonstrated. That completes my discussion of the test. Let's talk about the process. 309 specifies a number of steps and timing for each step. The process includes an opportunity after the commission has found a hardship exists for the commission to find an alternative purchaser or tenant that will preserve the building, or an alternative for the city to acquire protective interest. The maximum time frame for this whole process from application to the end of this is 380 business days from the complete application. This lays out the entire process and time frame. I will break it down to make it easier to see and understand. Note with regarding time frames, all time frames are in business days, but also that applicants can and have waived their rights under these time frames to give themselves and the commission additional time to deal with the application. The hardship process anticipates a two-phased application, whereby there's first a C of A application to determine if the proposed work is appropriate. And if that application is denied, the hardship application follows. However, where the applicant seeks to demolish the designated building, it's common for the applicant to concede their proposed work is inappropriate and just file for the hardship. Once the application is complete, the commission must hold at least one public hearing. Typically, there can be more, and there can be many public meetings. Commission has 90 business days to act on the hardship application. If the commission determines the applicant has failed to demonstrate a hardship, the application is denied. I note here that Charter Section 3021 establishes a special hardship appeals panel to hear appeals by nonprofits from denials of their hardship applications. I'm not going to talk about that today. If the commission finds the applicant has demonstrated a hardship, it makes a preliminary determination of insufficient return. This triggers a process and time frame for the commission to find an alternative buyer or to have the city acquire a protective interest in the property. The commission has 180 days to find an alternative purchaser who is willing to purchase the property on, quote, reasonably equivalent terms and conditions. If it does, the statute allows for a reasonable time for the purchaser and this new buyer to enter into a contract and close on the deal. However, if no alternative purchaser is found, or the alternative purchaser fails to enter the contract or it never closes, the commission has 20 business days to send a request to the mayor to acquire the property. The mayor then has 90 days to consider this request, and if it decides it wants to pursue condemnation to acquire an interest, it sends a letter to that effect. If the mayor does not give that notice, the commission then issues what I referred to before as the notice to proceed, which is the ultimate approval for the demolition or other inappropriate work to occur. The work must be done by the purchaser with reasonable promptness after the notice to proceed has been issued. Issuance of the notice to proceed does not eliminate the commission's jurisdiction over the property. If the property is in a historic district, the commission's jurisdiction remains and still has the authority to regulate what comes next on that parcel. If the property is an individual landmark, the commission will have to evaluate whether the scope of the work authorized by the notice to proceed eliminates or undermines the reasons for the designation. Obviously, demolition of an individual landmark probably means the site no longer has any significance. In that situation, the commission has de-designated the site. There could be a situation like, for example, if we had an individual landmark asking for an addition, like the Marymount School, where it was the hardship was approved, the commission would evaluate whether this inappropriate addition was so damaging to the integrity of the building that the de-designation was necessary. So with that, commissioners, I'm happy to answer questions or any clarifications.
Oh, Commissioner Goldblum?
Got a few. Okay. All right. In general, when a building is deemed to be or unable to produce the revenue that would meet the standard, the 6% return, if the reason that it cannot meet that return is due to actions of the owner itself, in other words, they didn't maintain it or they didn't, keep it up, how does that factor into the determination of the meeting of that amount of return?
Well, I think it's one of the factors the commissioners you could consider. If and then the question, if it was, I guess that's all I should say. It's a factor that you can consider, but you have to consider all the facts. It's not just, oh, the building's in bad shape, therefore it was intentional or whatever. You'd have to actually consider what the circumstances were.
Got it. Is there any distinction within our regulations that pay any special deference or attention to the fact that a building is owned by a religious institution as opposed to a different kind of nonprofit? And I'm asking more about how would our law intersect with free exercise of religion law?
Well, there's no, other than a prohibition against regulation of interiors of houses, of places of religious worship, the landmarks law is silent on religious organizations being treated any differently than any other property.
Okay.
And there have been cases, just to be clear, there have been cases where designation and regulation have been found not to violate, the religious rights of property owners.
Great. The alternative purchaser provision, is the commission required to find a purchaser or may it find a tenant?
The law requires that the alternative, the alternative person is willing to agree to, and I quote, identical interest that the purchaser is or that the other person in the contract is agreeing to. So, for example, sorry, that's totally opaque. So if I'm an owner and a nonprofit owner, I'm agreeing to sell this property to someone, the alternative purchaser has to be willing to buy the property in whole. Has to be. If it's a lease for 20 years, it has to be a lease, or 50 years, it has to be a lease for 50 years. The law is clear. It says an identical interest.
And in that case, I'm assuming from the way that you've worded it, the buyer has no veto power, or the seller has no veto power. We say,
correct.
Here's your buyer. Suck it up. Get married. That's it. They have no choice.
That's right. Correct.
Or they could choose to not demolish the building and do their own plan.
Right. Again, this alternative purchaser has to be willing to agree to an identical interest, and the terms and conditions have to be reasonably equivalent.
But under those circumstances,
that's right.
They have to.
Correct.
They have to take it.
Correct.
And is it possible in this venue for you to talk a little bit more about the hardship panel and what that,
I can only say that the hardship panel was, for those of you who are old enough to have been here in 1989, when the new charter came, there were two provisions on the charter revision. One, do you want this new charter for the whole entire city of New York? Second provision, should the Landmarks Commission have a hardship appeals panel? And
wow.
it was passed at that time. And it was very briefly constituted. It's 5 mayoral appointees. It was very briefly constituted, but I believe it has never been constituted after 1995. So it doesn't exist right now. It needs to have the mayor appoint people, and then it has to be.
How would that affect the timeline?
Well, it's one of those you're talking about a theoretical.
A theoretical situation where theoretically an applicant was told by the commission that they weren't allowed to do it, et cetera.
I would just say I don't think it's determinative at all. But in other words, if it didn't exist and it wasn't that because it hadn't been constituted, I don't think that would affect necessarily the outcome of the case. So remember, so if the commission denies an application for a hardship and the person says, I want to appeal to the hardship appeals panel, but it doesn't exist, and it may take a year or whatever that's not going to invalidate.
Clocks would stop, or clocks would not stop?
Well, there's no clock at this point. In other words, there's an appeal process that would have to be constituted, and then they theoretically they would appeal, but who knows how long it would be. So I think the reality is people wouldn't wait, but I can't say. I can't say.
All right, so okay, got it.
Unknown. It's a completely unknown situation right now.
All right, thanks.
Okay, Commissioner Ginsburg?
Can we get a copy of your presentation for future thought?
The answer would be, you can watch it on YouTube. I mean, the issue I have with just this is that a lot of it is the commentary. Obviously, that's more important. So to the extent that you may want to review this, I'm happy to talk to you about it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, great. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Commissioners.
Okay. So that concludes our public hearing and public meeting for September 30th, 2025. Thank you for your participation. We will see everyone at our next public hearing meeting, which is October 21st. Thank you.